In 113 BC, the last sound a Vestal Virgin named Marcia ever heard was the sealing of her own tomb. The darkness that followed was absolute. She was buried alive, but the true horror was what they left her with: a single lit oil lamp, a loaf of bread, a jug of water, and the precise mathematical certainty of how long it would take her to die. This is the story of Rome's most sacred women, the Vestal Virgins, and the nightmare punishment reserved exclusively for them. A punishment so psychologically devastating, historians have tried to erase it from the record. Picture this. You're walking through ancient Rome. You see 6 women in pure white, their hair intricately braided. Senators, generals, even the emperor himself. They step aside and bow. These women held more power than almost anyone in the ancient world. But that power came with an unthinkable price. Starting at age 6, girls were chosen from Rome's elite families. Their duty? Serve the goddess Vesta for 30 years. Their only job? Keep the sacred flame in her temple burning. Never let it go out. Because Roman belief was absolute. If that flame died, Rome died with it. And here is where the shadow falls. These women had to remain virgins for all 30 years. Not just physically pure. They couldn't even be accused of breaking their vow. A military defeat? Must be a Vestal's fault. An earthquake? A Vestal had sex. The city's survival was tied to their purity. The penalty for breaking this vow wasn't crucifixion. It wasn't beheading. Those deaths were too quick, too merciful. No. The punishment was live burial in a barren plot known as the Campus Sceleratus, the evil field. They would seal you underground in a marble tomb and simply walk away. But here is the legal loophole that reveals the chilling, calculated cruelty of Rome. Roman law technically forbade spilling a Vestal's blood. So they didn't execute her. They just left her in a room. What happened next wasn't their responsibility. Except they knew exactly what would happen next. The ritual they performed before sealing that tomb proves it. The year is 113 BCE. 3 Vestal Virgins, Aemilia, Licinia, and Marcia, stand accused. Their crime? Sexual impurity. But what was the evidence against them? A meteor shower, I am serious. Unusual astronomical activity. Some lightning struck a temple, perhaps an earthquake. The sources are unclear, but Roman priests, the augurs, examined these signs from the gods and declared the Vestals must have broken their vows. That's it. No witnesses, no physical proof, just bad weather and paranoid superstition. According to the historian Plutarch, Rome was in a panic. The city had suffered military defeats. The public needed a scapegoat. Powerful men needed a distraction from their own political scandals. So they pointed at the Vestals. Now witness the deliberately cruel ritual. The Pontifex Maximus, Rome's chief priest, arrives. He approaches the accused woman and recites a cold, formal sentence. I judge you to have committed incest. You are no longer a Vestal Virgin. With those words, she loses everything. Her status, her legal protections, her very identity. She becomes something else, something Rome doesn't even have a word for. Not quite human anymore. They place her in a covered litter, a closed box carried by slaves. The public cannot see her face. Looking at her might bring bad luck. The procession moves through the streets of Rome in complete, terrifying silence. No mourning, no words, just the sound of footsteps and the woman's ragged breathing inside that dark box. Imagine you are her. You can hear the crowd outside, but they refuse to speak. They refuse to acknowledge you ever existed. The procession reaches the Campus Sceleratus. There a chamber awaits, 12 feet deep, marble walls, a small couch, a table. They open the litter. Guards help her climb down a ladder into the tomb, and this is where the real psychological torture begins. The ladder is pulled up. You are alone in the chamber, and then they begin to lower the final heavy stone slab. The grinding sound is deafening in the small space. A sliver of light, then nothing. Total suffocating blackness, but you are not completely alone in the dark. According to Pliny the Elder, who documented Roman execution practices in disturbing detail, the priests placed specific items in the tomb before sealing it. A loaf of bread, a small jug of water, a container of milk, a cup of oil, and one single oil lamp already lit. You understand what they're doing, right? This isn't kindness. This is calculated cruelty. They are giving her just enough to survive, not to live, to extend the process. Because Roman law says they're not killing her. They're just putting her in a room with some supplies. Now let's do the math. I promise you will never forget these numbers. That oil lamp, with the amount of oil they provided, burns for approximately 4 to 6 hours. Once it goes out, absolute darkness, the kind where you literally cannot see your own hand in front of your face. The bread and water. If she rations with superhuman care, maybe 2 to 3 days of sustenance. Not enough to live on, but enough to keep her conscious. Longer than if she had nothing, but here is what makes this mathematically horrifying. Oxygen. A sealed chamber that size contains roughly 90 to 100 cubic meters of air. One human at rest consumes about half a cubic meter of oxygen per day. But she is not at rest. She is panicking, hyperventilating. Her heart is pounding. Do the math. She has approximately 48 to 72 hours of breathable air. Maybe. Now imagine you are in that space. The lamp is the only thing keeping you sane. You're rationing the oil drop by drop. You take a tiny bite of bread, a sip of water. You tell yourself, someone will come. This is a mistake, but then you hear them up above. Footsteps, muffled voices. They are conducting a ritual, consecrating the ground, making it sacred so no one will ever dig here. Then the footsteps fade. Then nothing, just your breathing, just the lamp flickering, just the marble walls pressing in. And here is the detail Pliny mentions that most people miss. There was a small breathing hole. A narrow shaft, maybe 4 inches wide, leading to the surface. Not wide enough to escape. Not wide enough to call for help effectively, but wide enough for sound to travel down, which means people could theoretically listen. Some sources suggest priests would check these holes to determine when the gods had claimed her, when the screaming stopped. But don't click away yet, because I haven't told you about the one thing these women did in their final hours that archaeologists found centuries later. One Vestal's final act was so defiant, it actually changed Roman law forever. In 337 BCE, a Vestal named Minutia was accused and buried alive. The historian Livy recorded her case specifically because of what they found when they eventually opened her tomb for a religious inspection years later. The marble walls were covered in scratch marks, deep, deliberate gouges where she had clawed at the stone with her fingernails. Some marks were at the base of the sealed entrance. Others were scattered randomly, as if she'd been feeling the walls in pitch darkness, desperately searching for a weak point. But here is the detail that haunts me. Some of the scratch marks were arranged in patterns, deliberate lines, possibly words, though too degraded to read by the time Livy's sources saw them. She was trying to leave a message. Think about the psychology. You are underground. Your lamp died hours ago. The air is getting stale. Your head is pounding from oxygen deprivation. You know you are going to die. So, what do you do with your final moments of consciousness? Some women prayed. Some curled up on the couch. But some, like Minutia, used their fingernails to scratch their truth into the marble. Maybe their innocence. Maybe the name of the man who falsely accused them. Maybe just, I was here. I existed. I mattered. According to Livy, Minutia's case sparked a huge controversy in Rome. Not out of sympathy, but because her scratches suggested she had survived for at least 3 full days before losing consciousness. Some senators argued this proved her innocence. If the gods truly wanted her dead, she would have died immediately. This led to a horrifying policy change. Future live burials would include less food and water. Just a symbolic amount. You see the calculated evil? They optimized the horror. They didn't want the women surviving long enough to create complications. But here is what nobody tells you about these more merciful deaths. Archaeologists and historians have found evidence suggesting at least one woman survived the full oxygen depletion timeline and died from the far slower agony of dehydration, which can take 7 to 10 days. How do they know? Because of what Renaissance workers discovered in 1485 when they accidentally broke into one of these forgotten tombs. And I need to warn you, this next part is going to stay with you. Picture this. It's 1485. Rome is in a building boom. Workers are digging foundations near where the ancient Campus Sceleratus used to be. A shovel hits stone. They assume it's rubble. But as they clear the dirt, they realize they've found something else. A sealed marble chamber, still intact, never opened. The foreman makes a decision that will haunt the historical record. He orders them to break the seal. According to contemporary accounts, here is what they found. A skeleton, still dressed in decayed fabric, lying face down on the floor, directly in front of the sealed entrance. Not on the couch, not against the wall, right there at the door. Arms extended upward, fingers spread against the stone. She died trying to push the slab open. But here is the detail that made Renaissance scholars write letter after letter about this discovery. Her skeletal fingers were wedged into a tiny gap, maybe half an inch between the door slab and the frame. Like she'd found that small space and tried with her last ounce of strength to pry the stone loose. The physics are simple. A marble slab that size weighs roughly 400 pounds. One starving, suffocating woman could not move it. She knew that, but she fought anyway, and here is where this story takes a turn that actually changed history. Renaissance humanists, haunted by this discovery, dug into the old records. They found a pattern. Dozens of Vestal accusations coincided with political crises, military defeats, or times when powerful men needed scapegoats. The evidence was almost always omens, or the tortured testimony of enslaved people. The 113 BCE triple burial, a politically motivated mass execution to distract from Senate corruption. The last known burial, under Emperor Domitian, was of a Vestal named Cornelia. He accused her, possibly because she refused a political marriage for her niece. When the chief Vestal defended her, Domitian exiled the chief Vestal. He buried Cornelia alive anyway, but his cruelty backfired. Roman citizens were disgusted. Public opinion turned. The Senate began to quietly defy him. 14 years later, Domitian was assassinated, and after his death, the Senate passed a formal resolution. Never again would a Vestal Virgin be buried alive. The practice ended. After more than 1,000 years of terror, the tombs were finally empty. Today, if you visit Rome, you can walk over where the Campus Sceleratus used to be. It's a park now. Tourists take photos. Locals walk their dogs. There is no memorial, no plaque. Nothing to tell you that women once screamed underground here while the city walked above them, but they were there. And the scratches on the marble proved they didn't go silently. The Romans called it a merciful execution because they didn't directly kill anyone. They just sealed a door and walked away. But we know better now. We've seen the scratch marks. We've done the math on the oxygen. So here is my question for you. Throughout history, societies have created brutal punishments specifically for women who violated so-called purity standards. What does that tell us about who these laws were really designed to control, and why? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if this video made you see the dark mechanics of historical justice, make sure you're subscribed. Because next week, I'm covering the Roman execution where the victim had to participate in their own death. And the psychological torture was even worse than the physical pain. I'll see you in the next one.